And for me, as an underbelly man, I'm not going to Sydney. So, the story behind this project is a very interesting one. In 2022, I went to see the president while he was on holiday in January, and he welcomed me to State House, and we sat down, and I said to him, President, if we don't fix the power problem in Zimbabwe, meeting the targets of 2030 are going to be impossible. And I outlined him what an impact it was having on industry and everybody of the frequent power outages caused by a shortage of electricity. With me was the chairman of ZESA Holdings, the late Dr. Gata, and he confirmed my views. Later that afternoon at about 3 o'clock, he convened a meeting of all the ministers involved, pulled them out of their holiday vacation. We met at her State House, and he asked his ministers, I think there were 6 ministers there, he asked them, these people are telling me that if this crisis of power is not satisfied, is not met, we will not be able to develop the economy of Zimbabwe. What is your view, and what are you doing about it? Well, we had an interesting discussion lasting about an hour and a half. We sat in the background listening, and because we were the small boys in the room. And at the end of it, the president basically gave an instruction to the Ministry of Energy to produce a paper in February that year to outline what government was going to do about meeting the problem. And after the meeting, he spoke to me personally, and he said to me, Eddie, what can the private sector do? Now, this is a man who in 2018, when he assumed power in Zimbabwe after winning the election, had committed himself to using the private sector in Zimbabwe to provide a driving force for development in Zimbabwe. And we had, in the private sector, had taken those words seriously. And we both Dr. Gata and myself went away from that meeting saying, right, what can we do? We had a few conversations, and Dr. Gata then convened a meeting at the ZESA Training Center, I think it was in March, where we had all the major consumers of power in the country. I don't think we had a single company refuse to attend. I think we had 76 companies, all had been invited, and everybody came. And those 76 companies consumed about 40% of Zimbabwe's power. We debated the issue, and we decided that we would form an association which would then tackle the problem. And this led to the formation of the IUG, the Intensive Energy User Group. Why an association? It's because many of these companies, especially the big ones, are multinational corporations, and they could not have equity in a subsidiary company in Zimbabwe without bringing in their international partners. So it was a point of legal convenience. So we set this organization up, and we've now been running since April 23. So just almost 3 years. And the first thing we did was to set up a trading company. And this company has been trading power successfully now for the last 3 years. And we started supplying the companies that we could supply with a limited availability of power from an independent power producer. And this has been a learning curve for all of us. One of the companies we picked up in April 23 was a mine called Blanket Mine, just north of Gonda in Zimbabwe. This is the largest gold mine in Zimbabwe. At the time, it employed about 2,000 employees, It's mining 1 kilometer and a quarter underground, 1,250 meters underground, and it was producing about 80,000 ounces of gold. You can do the numbers for yourself. And they were having problems with power. The quality of power, often not getting to them at 33, and the availability of power, frequent cut-offs due to load shedding. We stepped into the breach and we supplied what ZESA could not supply. We did that project on the basis of co-supply. We filled the gap. Last year, I was asked by the chief executive of Caledonia to come down to Gwanda and visit the plant. I went down with 2 or 3 of our executives, and I met the chief executive of Caledonia, the major shareholders, and he said to me, quite emotionally, he said, Eddie, we have achieved this year record output, 200,000 ounces of gold. And it's all because of what you guys have done for us. And he said, filling that gap in the power supply, which only meant a revenue to us of about $17 million in that year, was the difference between them being able to maximize output with the existing infrastructure that they had and not being able to do so. And you know, if you've got 500, 600 men underground, a kilometer underground, and the lights go out, you've got to turn on a big diesel generator, which will cost you about 35 cents a kilowatt hour to bring your men up to the surface. And then you've got to send them back to the to the township where they sit on their bums until the lights come back on and they can go back down. And this takes time. It takes an hour or more to get them back underground. The underground equipment cannot work with anything except electricity. And so you can imagine they were not utilizing their surface equipment fully. They were not making maximum benefit from the labor. Their overheads were the same, but they doubled production. On the strength of full availability of power, Caledonia made the decision to invest in a new mine, some 100 kilometers north of Bulawayo, which will, when it comes into operation, Madam Minister, will be the largest gold mine in Zimbabwe. And the combined output of the 2 mines will exceed 800,000 ounces. Now multiply by that by $5,000, and you're talking the biggest exporter in Zimbabwe. You're talking the biggest single producer of foreign exchange for this country. And the key to the decision was power. So we have been struggling with power supplies. ZESA has well over 100 solar-powered plants ready for investment. Not one commercial solar plant is currently under development because the money is just not available. And despite the rhetoric in the Western world about the willingness to finance green energy in the developing world, that sort of money has not been made available to us, partly because of the American legislation, ZEDERA, but also partly because of reluctance to make those sort of funds, concessional funds, available to Zimbabwe. So the struggle to secure new power by the private sector is principally a financial issue. So about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years, Caleb Dengo came to me, one of our directors. He's the chairman of Rio Tinto, and he came to me and he said, Eddie, let's go to Rabat. Now, I'd never heard of Afro-Exim annual conference in Rabat, but 41 DFIs attend that meeting. And we put the proposal to Afro-Exim, and they agreed to sponsor us at Rabat. And in the subsequent meeting at Rabat, we had 20-odd international firms represented. And the reception was so positive that we felt absolutely confident that we could finance this particular development. We started by talking of 1,000 megawatts. But ZESA said to us, the infrastructure for moving that power into the grid simply would not take it. So in consultation with ZESA Holdings, we have reduced the total project to 500. I'm still hoping that we'll be able to push it to 600 based on the studies that we're now undertaking. Now this will be the largest solar plant in Africa. It's the largest single investment in solar energy in Africa. And you know, many other parts of the world, it's amazing, especially in Europe, even in the countries which have cold, wet and snowy winters, solar power has become one of the big contributors to energy. And it's also become the cheapest. Today, you can invest in solar panels on your roof, and those solar panels will deliver electricity to your home at 2 cents a kilowatt hour, which is the cheapest power on earth. And we're taking advantage of that. And this has largely been made possible by the massive changes in technology which have occurred internationally over the last 4 years. I remember 3 or 4 years ago when we put solar panels on the roof of our home to get us out of the ZESA grid. We paid $300 for a 300-watt panel.
We are fully aware.
Today, a 700-watt panel costs you $45 at the factory, ex-factory in China. And installed here, about 75. So you see this dramatic reduction in the cost of the basic units. Accompanying that now is a massive reduction in the cost of batteries. 3 years ago, when we looked at this project, or looked at a project like this, batteries were $1 million for a megawatt of power in a battery. Today, we can buy batteries for about $100,000, $120,000 per megawatt. It's cheaper to put in batteries than it is to build power plants. And in China today, there are many installations which simply trade power, buying power at night when the rates are relatively low and selling it at peak when rates are higher. And so this project will use both. And we are going to put in 600 or 500 megawatts of solar panels floating on the lake, and 600 megawatts of panels is 1 million panels, just to give you some idea of the size of this operation. Just imagine 1 million solar panels floating on the lake. This is not a pickaninny project. This is a massive project. And associated with it will be batteries, sufficient batteries to hold the capacity. Now that's important, because one of the biggest problems of solar energy in the world is unreliability of supply. When they had 3 days hot weather in Spain a little while ago, the solar panels in Spain blew the whole system out of the water, and Spain and Portugal were without power completely for a few days. So you've got to be able to manage the power that goes into the grid, because you have 1 million panels floating on Kariba, and suddenly we have cloud cover or a storm, and the power disappears. It can be extremely disruptive. So we are putting all our power through a battery complex, and we'll feed power into the grid from the battery complex. Now, one of the reasons why we went to Kariba is quite complex. Number one, you've seen the problem of water supply at Kariba. What we've done, originally when Kariba was planned in the 50s, and we built the dam, which was opened in 1958, And Kariba is still the biggest man-made lake in the world, by a long way. And when we did that, we did it on the basis of river flow calculations based on 50-odd years of records. And we put 500 megawatts on both sides of the river, 500 in Zambia, 500 in Zim. And what we have subsequently done in recent years is to double that to 1,000 megawatts on both sides. And the problem with that is that that's bigger capacity than the capacity of the river. The river hasn't changed significantly. And we're now in a situation where, because the temptation is there to use the water that's available to generate power, because of the shortage of power in both Zambia and Zimbabwe, we have often run out of water, and the lake has not been able to deliver what it. Last year, Zambia got to the point where they were 3 hours of power a day. Now, when you get a situation like that, you have a real crisis. And what we have recognized is that you can increase the output of Kariba by about 30%. That's the output of the hydro plant, by conserving water when the sun is available and generating water to meet peak demands. You can turn Kariba on and off. You can't do that at Wanky with a coal-fired plant. So we're taking advantage of that. And Madam Minister, this is going to make a huge difference to Kariba itself. The other thing it does, it allows us to moderate the flow of the water below the dam. If Kariba fills up because of heavy rains in the north, and we open all the turbines, Zambia and Zimbabwe, we flood Mozambique. Kariba can't handle the water. And so it's become important from an ecological point of view and from an operational and human point of view to manage the river flow. And we are working with Mozambique as a group to develop further power plants on the lower Zambezi, but all based on continuous water supply from the big dams in the north. Now that was a vision of Dr. Garter. In many respects, the late Dr. Garter was a visionary. And we are now implementing that program as the private sector in Zimbabwe with the assistance of regional governments.
This meeting is being recorded.
I know that. Madam Minister, what's critical for us in the private sector is that the government recognizes us as a partner. And we are not seeking to compete with ZESA. We are seeking to collaborate with ZESA on developing the power industry in Zimbabwe. And this is the first major step. And we are able to raise money where the government can't raise money. And we are able to pay for our foreign loans where the government is not paying for its foreign loans. And therefore the international financial industry has confidence in us. We've built up a sound relationship with our banks over the last 3 years, and we're now exploiting that confidence. The project itself is 80% IUG and 20% CDF, which is Caleb Dengu's company. And it is totally 100% private sector, and it'll make a major contribution to resolving the power crisis in Zimbabwe when it comes on stream. We're looking at a potential cost of power of 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour at the dispatch point, which means we'll probably make a bit of money by selling it to the system at about 8 cents. I do apologize. But we are looking at the future with confidence. So thank you very much, Minister, for participating this morning. And I hope that this has encouraged you. We recognize you're our host, our landlord, and we look forward to working with you in the future.